So with that, let's start our session today. Um, Maybe you can start with a brief introduction about yourself, especially how did writing help you in your journey? And this is a book club, so we would like you to also read a few paragraphs or lines which you think is most impactful. But keeping I'm sure what we request everybody to bringing this before bringing the speaker is to get to know the speaker a little bit. So they all will have some answers, some questions, and some queries around towards the end. But at this point, I think it will be good if you can give a little brief introduction and how did writing help you?
Yeah, why don't I focus on writing? So
Okay.
terrific. Thank you so much. I just want to start by saying how thrilled I am to be here. I love the mission and vision of this company.
Thank you.
So thrilled. And as it is a mom relaunch, I'll just warn you that there is the chance that my 7-year-old will join us at some point.
Yes,
I
yes,
hope
and
not.
we welcome. We welcome. We sometimes I have to keep my fur baby in my hand and have the session, so if everything is fine.
Okay, terrific. Well, I am I was the kid that grew up always reading. My parents would come in during the summer vacation and say, "It's a beautiful day outside. You simply must go outside." And I'd say, "But I'm reading this," right? So I became an English lit major in college and always planned to become a professor. I came from a family of academics, and so planned to be a professor, but then decided to take a job right after college. And I was just going to work for a couple of years before I went back to get my PhD, but ended up falling in love with business. So fast forward to business school, and I had been working for about a decade. And when I got to business school, I had been living in New York City and had become obsessed with food and was doing a
Oh,
lot of cooking, was doing a lot of and going to a lot of restaurants. And I talked the school newspaper into letting me write a food column. And what I did is I would review the restaurants in town. And I was single at the time, so I would invite the male members of my class to join me, and I would review the my date as well. So it was a bit of a humorous, it was informational, but also humorous column that I did, and that's really where I started writing a lot. And I was writing some short stories just to kind of amuse myself, but not a lot of writing. And then fast forward again to when I was diagnosed with not one, but 2 cancers. And I had dinner with a friend. I was going to each person in my life and sitting down face to face and telling them that I had cancer. And I was out at dinner with a dear friend, and he said, "My God, you're not going to everyone and telling them you have cancer, are you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that was my intention." And he said, "You're going to exhaust yourself and you're not going to be able to keep up with it. So I would suggest you start keeping a blog." And there is a company called caringbridge.org where people who are in crisis can keep a blog and inform everyone in their network what's going on. And this actually, for me, was very transformational. I was able to invite people via email, which is not ideal, but tell people what was going on. And as there were updates to my cancer journey, I would write it in a blog, oftentimes humorously to keep my reader interested. But I kept a blog. And it was from this blog that I had a number of people say to me, "You're really funny. You should think about turning this into a book." And of course, everybody tells you that, like, "Oh, I love your writing. You really should write a book." And it's a giant leap forward from blog to book. But I thought, God, I have some time on my hands right now. So I started writing the book during the year that I was being treated for cancer. And it took me 10 years to write that book. The first book I wrote was actually a guidebook to the newly diagnosed, because what you discover, and I don't know how many people on the call have had someone close to them impacted by cancer, but what you quickly discover is that there's a whole language and world out there that you have no knowledge of. And so it can be confusing when doctors and caregivers are talking about treatments, or they're talking about, what is the difference between a diagnosis and a prognosis? I mean, just simple terms that I wasn't familiar with. So I started writing a guidebook for the newly diagnosed. And when I finally finished that and started shopping it around, which is apparently in the publishing industry not the way you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to do a book. You're supposed to like put together a book proposal, and then someone accepts it, and then you write the book. But I just wanted to write the book. But I was told no one will ever read a guidebook from somebody who isn't an expert, and the only people who are experts are doctors. And of course, I said, I respectfully disagree with you, but they said, you have a good voice, you're funny, you should write a memoir. And so that's what I did.
Awesome. So, what caught my attention is like when you diagnosed with cancer, you started talking to people and telling them about it.
Yeah.
Why? What was it going to help you with?
Well, I'd love to say that initially that is exactly what I did, but it took me a while. I will be honest, with my first cancer diagnosis, I had what I've come to understand as a pretty stereotypical reaction, which is I wanted to keep it very, very private. I didn't want anyone to know about my health issues. And if I'm honest, there was a little bit of shame associated with being ill, with having an issue. And because, it was my potential death, we were talking about, that's uncomfortable to talk about, especially I think in American culture. And people are not comfortable talking about death and illness. And so I had shame, and I wanted to be very private. I wanted to go through my treatments, and I wanted to get back into my life as quickly as possible. And this was just going to be a little blip. Then I received a second cancer diagnosis. And I was like, wow, all bets are off. It is unclear whether I will make it through the year. And so I need to change my focus from hiding what's going on to be very, very open and trying to live my life as gracefully as possible. Because if I am going to die this year, then I want to make sure I have done that as graceful as I can be, And so I ended up talking very openly with people about my cancer, both in the blog and just in general. And I have continued that. Certainly, it's funny, people say, oh my God, are you okay talking about the book? And I'm like, people, it is on the internet. It can be bought anywhere. I have to be comfortable talking about these things. And I am. And now I'm doing corporate talks. I did a TED Talk the other day, and what I'm talking to people about is how to talk to people who are in crisis, how to talk to employees, how to talk to friends and family who are in crisis.
Okay, so I'm going to take a deeper dive into this because, I'm sure people in our program can find several things that you have already spoken on other talks and TED Talks and all, but there are a couple of things that really highlighted your points that you're making. Now, understand that you as a person and your journey and what you have done and achieved with humor, with making sure that we are able to take what life gives to us is so relevant, so relevant to the members of our program who are hearing this. And I'll tell you a little bit of analogy, right? And that's why I asked you this question. You were talking to people, right? That is not the first reaction, right? So I say that when women take a career break, right? When they're trying to get back, they're struggling hard. I call that they're going through an untold disease. I'm not as severe as cancer, but they are going through that untold disease that is laid upon us as society, in the workplace, at home, and we are given certain things that we feel that this is our framework that we have to live in, right? And same hold true for you when you heard the first time that you had that cancer and you really don't know how to whether you want to talk about it, whether you want to deal with on your own, till you figured out that now it's time to talk and it's right?
Yeah.
So help us get into that time, that zone that you were in your mindset. Let us visualize your, and again, please, if it helps bring any memories back, I really apologize, but help moms understand what you went through when you see that this is a life changing thing that I'm going through, right? And women, when they take the career break, if they are already working, they are taking a life changing decision. They don't know what they are doing, they don't know what it will impact. They get into the responsibilities that are given us in our framework. When they're coming back, they realize that that decision was good, but now I'm struggling here. How do I get back?
Yeah.
Most of them, they try to struggle on their own. Most of them try to figure. That's why this whole Mom Relaunch program was founded, so we can talk to each other. So again, this is a very important topic. If we can delve a little deeper into it,
I'd
and
be thrilled to. I'd be
yes,
thrilled. And I do see some
mhm,
big leaps or some
mhm,
key learnings. And
yes, mhm,
one of them, like this whole idea of shame,
yes, mhm,
it's crazy.
mhm,
But obviously, or maybe not so obviously, I have a ton of girlfriends who have
mhm,
taken time off. I intentionally took time off
right,
to have
mhm,
cancer, but many moms I know have a shame that they
mhm,
said, I took a break for 10 years
yes,
to raise children. Like one of the greatest honors and privileges and most important jobs is to raise healthy, happy human
absolutely,
beings, healthy, happy,
so well said.
capable human beings. And
Mhm,
so I get that, like, they're embarrassed. Oh my God, there's a gap in my resume. Hell yeah,
mhm,
there's a gap in your resume
mhm,
for the corporate world, but you've had a very, very important job. So
mhm,
I think thinking about what your narrative is, what
mhm,
your narrative is in your head, and then what your narrative is when you are speaking with corporations. And what I would say, the line I would draw back to having cancer, like my blog was my
mhm,
opportunity to craft my narrative. The friend who told me you need to start blogging to tell people about what's going on also said to me, Sarah, you are crafting your narrative, your health story narrative.
mhm,
Tell them what to think. And so I would challenge everyone on the phone to think about that as well. Like, what's my narrative?
mhm,
Like my narrative maybe should be, wow, I took that decade off in order to raise happy, healthy human beings, and that's one of the most important jobs out there. And now that those children are launched in school and are arguably, I would say needing you less from a feeding them and clothing them, though they still need mommy to to deal with
yeah,
all the things they're dealing with in junior high, high school, and college. It's
mhm,
true, still need you.
mhm,
But if you are now interested in turning your time back to work, thinking about what are the skills you developed during that time
mhm,
and how can they be used and what would you like to be doing? Very
mhm,
often when I tell someone, when I'm talking to somebody who's making a career transition, because
mhm,
that's what you're doing, you're transitioning from one kind of job into another, I say, right, so what out there attracts you? And
mhm,
do you know anyone who's working in that industry?
mhm,
Reach out to people you know and you've worked with, people who know how outstanding you were when you were in the workforce. Find out, ask them, hey, would you be willing to talk to me about what it's like at your company? And can we talk about whether some of the skills I had before that are, by the way, I still have, and some other skills I've developed over the last 10 years, whether they would be helpful
mhm,
in the industry you're in. And I really encourage people to do that. Or maybe you have a tremendous network that you've made through school. There are other parents who are maybe in industries that might be interesting, and maybe they saw the great work you did on the PTA, and maybe they'd be interested in talking to you about opportunities at their companies. So I would think creatively first about your narrative. Start
mhm,
here, start in your own head. What's your narrative? Think about what your narrative is to other people, and then think about who and what your network is. in order to go out and tell that story.
Thank you. Thank you. And I hope everybody took a good note of this important, critical insight that Sarah has brought in. Now, Sarah, another thing that really caught my attention is the word humor. And now you have mentioned that multiple times. You have such an amazing smile. Tell us about how should we keep up with that humor, because life has so many ups and downs.
Yeah. So,
Dealing with that is very important, difficult, right? So tell us what we can do.
well, I think for me, it started with gallows humor, right?
Okay.
I mean, if you think you're going to die during the year, I would make comments like, to people like, I know I'm about to come across as somebody who has cancer, but here's my insight. I mean, just calling out what is out there. That's often the humor. Or it turns out when you are going through something like cancer treatments, your body does a lot of freaky and weird things. And if you can see the humor in it, it's going to relax you and it's going to relax everyone around you. So I tried to use humor in my blog so that people would come back and continue to read it. In fact, one of the things I did, having a background in business, I created KPIs, key performance indicators, for my cancer treatment. And I would assess myself each blog. I would share with people how I was tracking in either meeting or exceeding my KPIs. And actually, at the end of my cancer treatments, I had exceeded all of the KPIs. And so I announced in my blog that I believed that I had won the President's Club trip to Mexico. And so announced in my blog that my husband needed to take me to Mexico for the President's Club. And he did. So that was great.
Good for him.
Yeah, no, humor allows all of us to laugh and relax and gain perspective. I think it is easy. It is easy to go down a rabbit hole of doomsday predictions, and maybe people out there are doing that with their career right now. We all need a little wallow every once in a while, but then I think you have to pull yourself up and say, okay, let me gain some perspective. Let me laugh at how ridiculous it is that I was wallowing, and now let me set my sights on what I'm going to do.
Wow. Amazing. I'll tell you a story about one of my friend who is a really is a mentor to many people, including me, and came to know that he was going through Parkinson's. And when I reached out to him, his statement was, "Yeah, I'm shaken but not stirred." So that's kind of where and he's writing a book called Unshaken, and he has started doing comedy shows
Yes.
about. And I am so amazed. It's like for hours I can't even move my body, but when I move my body, I'm able to do some things, and that's when I do. So again, I think apart from the medicines, I also think that I've heard you talk about eating properly, and nowadays we are. I'm personally hearing a lot of people going through cancer, and so do you see that there's a rise in this disease? And data I'm not tracking. So maybe since you're so much into this field, maybe you can tell us, is there anything that is caused because of the lifestyle we are in, with the stress, the type of food we are eating? Any guidance for moms so that we can make sure that we are all healthy and eating properly and taking care of ourselves?
Yeah. If I could just speak quickly to kind of the comment that your friend is now doing stand-up comedy. There is something very illuminating and activating from a sense of urgency when you do think your time is limited on this earth. A girlfriend of mine, when I was first diagnosed, said to me, Sarah, the difference between you and me is we both know we're going to die, but you actually believe it.
Yeah.
And I think that's
So
true.
well said.
I think when you receive a diagnosis like cancer, like Parkinson's, you recognize, wow, I'm not immortal. I am going to die. And then I think you start to say, right, okay, so if I have limited time, what do I need to get done? What do I need to do? So, I mean, I applaud your friend for his humor and for his, I mean, what can he lose at this point?
Yeah,
What can he
exactly.
lose? So, so you go ahead and do something like that. So well done. But back to food. Yeah, I am not somebody, you know, certainly I was a teenager, so I did have time where I was eating absolute crap. But for the most part, I grew up in a house. My mom cooked very healthfully. We had very little takeout. But you know, when I was diagnosed, I thought, Jesus God, what what have I been eating? Because there is environment, you know, there's what's going on in your body and then what you're putting in your body. And I asked all of my oncologists, and I had multiple, you know, what could I be eating differently? And they just said, don't eat processed food, eat real food. And then I actually, I may have shared with you, I was advising a startup that was looking to help cancer patients adopt a ketogenic diet. And what a ketogenic diet does is you remove, to the best of your ability, carbs and sugar, because carbs, of course, become sugar, because cancer cells can only feed on glucose. Like the cancer cells are not super flexible like our other cells, so they can only feed on glucose, whereas our healthy cells can feed on fat and protein. And so the idea of adopting a ketogenic diet is that by removing the sugar, you will weaken the cancer cells and you will strengthen the healthy cells. And then the idea here is that, you know, that any sort of treatment you take might be more effective because it's on weakened cancer cells. So I would say, I mean, a ketogenic diet is hard to adopt, which is why this company is existing, to try to help cancer patients adopt it. I kind of have adopted a modified ketogenic diet, even though I am no evidence of disease for either of my cancers right now, no evidence of disease, but I just thought I'd prefer, I feel better. I'd prefer to be eating like this. As for the higher incidence of cancer, my understanding, and I don't have statistics at the ready, but my understanding is that they are seeing more people with cancer because more people are testing. So early they are knowing that somebody has cancer because they have the ability to track it. Whereas before, people might die, but they might have died of something else, but they did have cancer. Right.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So,
Because
you know, I mean, the crazy statistic from the American Cancer Society is that 1 in 3 women will be diagnosed with a form of cancer during her lifetime. 1 in 3 women. And it's 1 in 2 for men.
Wow.
So what I say to people, it's not a matter of if you'll know someone with cancer. It's a matter of when you'll know someone with cancer, which is why I argue we have to practice talking about these difficult things. We need to talk openly and honestly and get comfortable with it so that we can be there for the people in our lives, so that we can talk with them comfortably about this really hard thing they're going through.
Yeah. And I think the very fact that we should step up and talk about the struggles that we face, whether it is cancer, whether it is returning back to the career, it's the more we ask, the more people can hear, the more they can be aware. And I personally believe that everybody wants to help. They just don't know how to. And
so
if
tell
we
them
can
how to. Tell them how to. And what we're doing by talking is we're not isolating one another. And I don't know how many women are feeling this way. Like, you know, sometimes you'll feel like I am the only one who doesn't have a job. I am the only person who is wholly unqualified. And it turns out it's not true. It turns out there are a lot of people struggling with it. It turns out there are a lot of people who, as you say, want to help. And it's a matter of saying to them, hey, will you just talk to me about this? Will you give me 15 minutes to explain what you do at your company so that I can understand, gosh, do I have the skills to work there? Could I be a good fit? Or just somewhere in that industry. Maybe you remove the heat for the person. Like, I'm not coming to work at your company. I just want to understand the industry, or I want to understand what you're doing because I'm in the exploratory stage of
Yeah,
my research.
absolutely. Absolutely. So on the same token, we have this year like started allies and inviting people, started the allies program for Mom Relaunch, just
Awesome.
because whenever we ask people, it's like, how can we help you? And it's like, okay, we'll let you know, and we never get back. So this Power Hour series, and as well as many people are now stepping up to help. We have started our so-called fundraising for on PayPal. Just we'll share that link with you as well. Please forward it in case if people want to come and donate. And we call it as adopt a mom for taking care of their taking care of their program fee and a few other things that we can run. So we will love to have your allyship in that as well.
Awesome.
Before I open up for any questions from our group, will you be open on sharing a few lines that is really, really close to your heart from your book?
Yeah.
Anything that, especially that all you're trying to talk about the mindset, the eagerness to open up, talk about the struggles that they are facing. So if you can read a few lines to all of us, and when I and Madhu, we can open up for questions to the audience.
Great. If you will bear with me, I'd like to read an excerpt, my favorite excerpt from the book,
Yes.
called One-on-One Yoga Practice. And I
Oh
just thought
yeah.
especially appropriate given that we were doing meditation, and it'll probably take me 5 minutes to read it.
Yes,
Okay, super.
absolutely. I would love to. And Sarah, is that okay if we make a short video of this excerpt
Oh
and
yeah,
share?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. So we
All
are
right.
looking forward to it.
I am now going. Okay. One-on-one yoga practice. My friend Tripti has a special room in her home for her yoga practice. It is a serene room where once you close the door, all sounds from her home disappear. You cannot hear her Bernese mountain dog, Otis, bounding up and down the stairs or playing with his stuffed toys. You cannot hear her husband, Todd, tapping away at the computer or running a conference call or trying to find the words to tell my husband, who has come with me, how sorry he is that I have cancer and ask how he can help. The first thing you notice when you walk into Tripti's practice room is the small shrine she keeps of the statue of the Hindu deity Ganesh. Tripti will tell me that Ganesh is known to place obstacles in front of us so that we may overcome them and learn and grow as people. But I don't know this yet. There is also a bookcase filled with books on yoga and meditation, and there are mats and pillows and foam blocks stacked against the wall to support anyone in this serene room who wishes to practice their yoga. Given that my yoga practice was limited, Tripti began this first session gently. We focus first on breathing. We breathe in and we breathe out. We breathe over 5 counts. We breathe for a long time. I try to match my breath to hers, and I try to focus on her voice only, not the voice in my head that is chanting, I have cancer, I have cancer, I have cancer, but instead this soothing voice of my friend who is willing me to breathe. She shows me how to do child's pose, down on all fours. Now put your feet together and allow your knees to push out and create a triangle with your legs. Now lower your butt to your feet and bring your hands together and extend your arms forward. Allow your forehead to touch the ground. Sink into the pose. Breathe, breathe. Good. Hold the pose. Breathe through the pose. Breathe. Good. What Tripti doesn't know is that I've been doing this pose all week without knowing that it was child's pose. It is a pose my body has intuitively taken, a kind of modified fetal position, as the waves of sobs passed through me, and I mentally tried to get my head around the fact that I have incurable cancer. Incurable cancer. From child's pose, Tripti has me transition into a seated position with my legs in front of me, now forming a gentle square as the bottoms of my feet touch and my knees become the sharp opposing points of the square. At first, I am just able to keep that position with my hands draped lightly on my sharp knees. I breathe, we breathe. Second and minutes go by. Tripti tells me to be concerned only with what is right here in front of me, what is right now. I try to focus on getting this one thing right. We deepen this pose by bending over our bodies, our legs, our gentle squares with sharp knees. I am a pretzel of limbs. I am a clam that is closed tight. I am a child hiding a secret. I am a woman terrified that she has cancer who is just trying to breathe through the appointments, breathe through the tests, breathe through the treatments, breathe through this pose. I note my heart has slowed and I have lost track of time. I have lost so much this week. My health, my perceived immortality, my innocence, my dignity. When my world came to a screeching halt with my diagnosis, somehow, inconceivably, it continued for everyone else. Everyone else is going about their lives and naively believing they have time enough to waste, while I wonder if I will still be breathing in and out a year from now. We end this first yoga practice together, sitting with our legs crossed and our hands pressed together in prayer, close to our hearts. Tripti says some beautiful words about time taken in practice being a gift to oneself and how being a light in the world, and then ends with namaste. In Hindi, this word means, I bow to the divine in you. I've always suspected many people say namaste, do so without truly understanding what it means. Tripti means the phrase sincerely, and we bow to the divine in one another. Once we have finished our practice, she looks directly in my eyes and asks how I am doing. At the surface, she is asking how the yoga practice was for me, but I know what she is really asking is what's going on in my head and in my heart. Even when you have spent countless evenings, weekends, years sharing your lives across decades, somehow there are subjects that are still taboo between close friends. Death and dying are two of them. This is a safe space, Sarah. You can say whatever you need to say. I know, I said. I could feel all the things I needed to say lining up in my throat, pushing and shoving one another to be the first one out of my mouth. I wanted to shove them back down. I wanted to gulp them into my stomach where it was too far for them to climb back up and out and be seen for the ugly, small thoughts they were. I wanted to tamp them down so they couldn't trigger the tidal wave of emotions threatening to breach my levee of control. I feared once they were said, my thoughts, my fears, my new reality couldn't be unsaid. It, they, this would be true. Of course we all die. Of course we all die. I just didn't want it to be true for me. Not now, maybe not ever. I lose my battle with my ugly small thoughts and then come pouring out of me in no coherent order. I lay them in front of her like I am laying out photos of myself naked. I am ashamed. And yet once I start, I cannot stop. Handle the emotional pain. Right now, I'm so stressed out that I'm not convinced I won't die of a heart attack before the cancer can have a chance to kill me. I'm honestly losing my mind. I can't eat. I can't sleep. And all I keep thinking is, I have cancer. If I have to die now, this year, is there a way that I can die gracefully, not embarrass myself? If I have to die, I desperately want to die well, without hysteria and loss of dignity. And I just don't know if I can do that because I'm so scared. I'm just so scared. My voice was shaking. My whole body was shaking. I don't know that I have ever been more vulnerable with another human being. I don't think Tripti tried to tell me that everything was going to be okay, or that it would be different from what I was describing. She listened and she cried with me, and she promised to be with me regardless of the outcome. She promised that we would take everything one step at a time. She would be the captain of Team 2. She would help me breathe. Thank you.
To you, and I'm sure they will share their. I know I was totally zapped listening to you, and thank you for sharing this. And I know you mentioned about something about what is acceptable in American culture, and I think we'll have another long discussion if I start with some of the things that you have shared here in your excerpt, as well as how Ganesha puts obstacles for us to be stronger. Um, I sharing, like, I don't know if I've shared with many people here in our program as well, but I talk about write your own eulogy and work backwards. I have also put a date. I know that this is, I've kind of given an end date to myself and say what I'm going to do in these years. If I survive beyond that, it's great. It's a bonus. So I do understand each and everything that you're talking about. And knowing that we are all going to die, and but when and how we are going to work towards that, it's
Yeah.
very
More
important.
importantly, how are we going to live?
How are we going to live? And
How are we going to live?
having that plan again is very, very important. And one of the things we teach in our program as well is have a canvas for your life. I call it as work life canvas in my own book. It's a one page thing, is put a start date and end date and put a goal and vision and how you're going to achieve those things and be accountable. So again, I'm sure your talk has not only given so many insights. I think we will love to have you back again sometime to just see how we are doing, what we are doing, and help us out. And I'm going to open up for questions for everybody else to interact with you. I'm sure they have prepared a few more things. Um, Again, I'm a little speechless here listening to your talk and your, especially your excerpt. Very,
I
very
have a
heartfelt.
question. I do have
Yes.
a question. Um, can you hear me, Sarah?
Yep.
Okay.
That's Juhi.
Yeah. My first question to you is, you started with reading, right? And then you went to business, and then you went to food column, right? But then why didn't you go and say that me as a cancer survivor? I mean, why did you put cancer as your main front, on the forefront? Like, why wasn't food column on the forefront? If
When I describe myself, why
yes,
do I?
yes, yes, yes,
Yeah, I think yeah, it's it's an interesting question because I don't think I define myself.
yeah.
Like I will tell you a funny story.
Okay.
When I when I did the book launch, I had a book launch party.
Okay.
And I did it here in my hometown of Mill Valley, California, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. And I just invited everyone in my social circle, who lived, kind of in Marin or maybe San Francisco, right? So maybe we invited, I don't know, 100 people, right? And maybe 50 showed up.
Okay.
And a girlfriend of mine came to it, and I had done my reading, and I was sitting there signing books, and I had two girlfriends in front of me, and I was signing books for them. And this other girlfriend walks up, and she was like, "You wrote a book? You had cancer?"
Okay. Yeah.
And she turned to these other two girlfriends of mine. She's like, "Did you guys know she had cancer? Did you know she wrote a book?" And they both said yes. And this woman was like, "I guess I'm a new friend. I had no idea of any of that." And so that maybe that's my defensive way of saying, I don't know that I lead with cancer anymore, and I don't know that defines me. But certainly the book is the most is the biggest writing I've ever done. I've never been published anywhere else.
Yeah.
And
so it comes on the forefront instead of cancer, right?
I think if I were describing myself, like the way I tend to describe myself is that I'm a seeker, I'm a collector of people and a connector of people. That's what I love to do. And I do that through my work. I do that through my personal life. I'm a mom. I'm a wife, mostly a good wife.
That's a good show. I like. Yeah. 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 And
no, go ahead.
Yeah. And I have one more question. Now, this is a very common question that all of the moms are asked in our interviews. right? And only moms are asked because, dads, all of them have like a continuous job and everything. So the moms are asked that, what did you do in your time off? That the time that you took off, 5 years, 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And so, should we start with an official statement and explain about ourselves, or should we, because this is the company, by mom and for moms, or should we be saying that we've spent like valuable hours, driving our kids around and, to swimming, karate classes, and all that? Should we be saying that? I mean, is it worth that? I mean, would the interviewers think in their mind, well, all moms do that, you know?
So I'm a big believer is in the fact that life is told in stories. And of
Yeah.
course I say that because I've just written a book, but this is how I interview as well, or this is how I speak to people if I'm even at a cocktail party, is I have a series of stories, or you can use the word narrative, whatever it is. So I have stories that I tell people, and hopefully they're funny stories that people will remember. So if I were preparing to go back into the workforce and talking about what I did during my time off, I might say, let me share with you, over the last year, I have been COO, oftentimes CFO, CEO of a small startup business known as the McDonald household. As COO,
Yeah.
here's what I do. I do all event planning. I do
Yeah.
all logistics.
Yeah.
I do all transportation. And I would translate into business terms, and that would be my way of making light of it, but also making the point.
Yes.
This is all the stuff that I did.
Yes, explaining it very well. Yes.
Yeah, I did people development.
Yeah.
You did people development.
Yeah.
More than anything else. I did contract negotiations. I did mediation. How many of you have mediated between your husband and your children?
Always, yeah.
And it's high stakes, right? I do high stakes mediation, or high stakes mediation between children. And so I would put that lens on it, and then I would tell that story, and then I would have a story to pull out, like a high stakes mediation. And I would describe a mediation between, say, your husband and your children, and I would describe it in business terms, and you would have that funny thing, because like you would laugh. The person would be like, oh my God, totally what it is. And the skills, the number of corporate people who are like, it's easier to, how many moms have you talked to who are like, oh my God, it was so great to go back to work because I had time for me and it's an easier job. I mean, you can make a lot out of that as well. And so I would have a whole bunch of just little funny stories that you can pepper in, either during the cocktail hour where you're networking with other parents, and that might translate into an informational interview. I mean, the key is that, like, one of the things I tell people who are re-entering, it's not going to be the first job interview that you go to where you're going to get the job. No. It's going to be like the 10th, and it's going to be because one person introduced you to another, and what you're trying to do is find out where's the best fit. Right? So your goal is actually just to get an informational interview, to gather information, to get you to the next place. It's like hopping from stone to stone to stone till you figure out, okay, this is actually where I want to land.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a while. So also, like, give yourself a break. Don't say, like most people, it takes 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. No.
Like 3 to 6 months. So just know that that's going to be the time, and to best of your ability, relax about it and spend the time developing your stories. And then all you're doing is networking. All you're doing is everybody you come into contact with. Oh gosh, that sounds super interesting. I wonder, would you mind introducing me to that person? Because I would love to better understand what it's like to be a publisher at blah, blah.
Yeah. No. Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
I also have a question. I'm sorry. I have a question. First, hi, Sarah. Thank you for joining us. And I really like your advice about changing our narrative and referring to our career break as a transformation, rather than a career break. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I just wanted to see what you think about
why. Industry. You worked in a different industry for 10 years. I mean, just make it funny for yourself. But this is where you have to start. This is where you have to believe it.
Yeah. Why do you think some people struggle when they're faced with adversity, rather than someone like yourself, who they manage to thrive and emerge stronger? Why do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe sometimes it's because you haven't seen somebody else go through it. I think, for instance, a cancer diagnosis, for a lot of us growing up, a cancer diagnosis was a death sentence, guaranteed death sentence, because there weren't a lot of treatments out there, because doctors didn't know as much about cancer. And now, through just some tremendous science, the doctors and some amazing motivated people who have raised money for cancer research, there are tremendous treatments out there for, say, breast cancer, like Avon Breast Cancer Watch, Susan G. Komen, all these groups that have raised money. And by the way, that always started with one or two people who said, we're going to start a walk, or we're going to start Cycle for Survival, which it raises money, which is the group that I fundraise for. It starts with one motivated person. And through that, we now have treatment options for cancer patients, and people can now survive. And so I think what's important when you're looking down the long, dark tunnel of whatever it is, your crisis, it's important to see that there's light on the other side. And often that's in the form of other people. So one of the things I did when I was first diagnosed is I reached out to I knew two people who had had cancer. I reached out to them and I talked with them about it. And then what was wild is as I started to talk to people about having cancer, I discovered how many people I knew had had cancer. And they said to me, I made it. Really important that you understand that I made it. And it was. And so as I went through and knew more people who had survived cancer, I began to believe that I could. And I think it's similar for you guys. Like talk to people who transitioned back into the workforce, and how did they do it? And how do they feel now? And ask those people for help, but also look to them for your inspiration. Like, oh my God, I can do it because all these other women have done it successfully. And I will tell you, my college roommate went through this. And I remember my college roommate was so much smarter than I was. I was an English lit major. She was an economics major. She's just so smart, right? And I went to visit her. I was working. She was taking time off to raise her children. And she took, I think, 7 years off. And I went and visited her when she was thinking about transitioning back. And I was like, wow, so what are you thinking about doing? She's like, I don't know, because I'm so wholly unqualified to do anything. And I said, I see you as one of the most capable, smart, accomplished women I know. Let me remind you of who you were pre-kids. Then let's you and me talk about who you're going to be post-kids. And she did not go back. She had run a bank. She had been a branch manager at a bank. She decided not to go back into that. You know why? Because she was in LA and she kept getting held up at gunpoint. Like, it happened multiple times, 5 times to her. And she's like, I'm not going to go back into that work. She's now a teacher, really, really happy, super, super happy. But she had to rethink, like, where do I get the greatest joy? She's a smart, capable woman who explains things really well and loves kids. So now she's a teacher. But I have to say, when I first talked to her, she was like, what am I even qualified to do? And so you have to change here. Everything, and you have to see other people who have done it and say, wow, wow, they did it, I can do it too.
Thank you.
Hi, Sarah. Okay, I'm going. Thank you
who's
so much for coming, and thank you so much. We've got a lot of valuable inputs from you, and it's really inspiring to listen to you. And I already feel very powerful, honestly. Like you were saying, when we are diagnosed with such things like cancer or anything, right? So as you said, like there is a sense of urgency, with which you start to be productive, or you basically, prioritize and have a different outlook, have a different perspective towards your life, towards our life, and it's overwhelming. Like there is a lot going on physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and I could definitely feel like when you were reading the notes from your book, right? And as Rina has put, like, there is a common thing, even though like taking a break and then trying to come back, like we are overwhelmed, scared, all those emotional and lots of questions, right? So what are the qualities, that helped you, just keep going and not to give up hope? And what are your suggestions for us, like to keep up with it and, just have the drive towards it,
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your comments, and thank you for your question. I think it sounds like, if I can make the leap from the beginning of our time together, starting with meditation is a beautiful way to ground yourself and still your mind and focus on the breath. I became a true believer in meditation during my year of cancer, just to steady myself. And then I'm an executive coach now. That's one of the hats I wear. And one of the things I suggest to people is that you spend a little time visioning what the future is. Like, what is your ultimate? Rina very rightly said, like, what is your goal? Set your goal. And when you're having a particularly optimistic day, set that goal, write it down for yourself. Right? Like some people do vision boards, they'll cut out pictures of what the future looks like. Some people write it, do actual physical goals, or maybe it just might be one simple phrase. Here's what I want to do. Here's the goal in the next year. Write it down for yourself. And after your meditation practice, look at it and say, right, okay, this is my goal. And this is what I'm meant to do. And steep yourself in that and believe in that. And you will have started your day off right. You will have started your day off centered in yourself, grounded, believing, and this is your intention, right? This is your goal. So that's what I would just keep coming back to that, because, we all have, like I always like to say, just keep going back to the mat. It's all practice, right? There is no yoga or meditation expert. Like they all tell you, Thich Nhat Hanh, Pema Chodron, they all tell you, just go back to it. Just keep bringing the mind back to it. The same is true of everything in our lives. Just keep getting back on the mat and remind yourself and believe in yourself. And that is how you will do it. But it is hard work. There are hard days. We all have hard days, but start it out right with the meditation and the intention. That would be my advice.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for answering that. Yeah, my name is Priyanka, and thanks for reading that beautiful excerpt from your book. It made me really emotional, actually. But yeah, one question what I had is like, so what are the lifestyle changes you made, after you surviving the cancer? And one more thing is, I'm really, really happy that you were able to, survive and beat the cancer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, me too.
Sarah, before you answer this question, I just want to have a quick time check. I know we are a few minutes okay. Above, is it okay?
I'm okay. I
Perfect.
I do not
Okay.
have a hard stop. I guarded the time. I did not guard the
Awesome.
time before as well as I am guarding this time, but yes,
No, thank
I
you.
don't have a
Thank you
hard.
for your generosity. And let's continue.
Happy to do it. Happy to do it. So, it's funny, when I wrote the book, I sent it out to a couple of beta readers to say, hey, what do you think? And I sent it to my sister. She's like, there's a chapter missing. And I said, okay. And she said, the chapter missing is the at the end, you need to explain the so what. Who cares? Who cares? What are you doing differently, or how do you live your life differently? And she said, and I'm not going to tell you what you're doing differently, but I know you're doing things differently. So I loved that. So I am an extrovert. I am a people person. I described myself as a collector and connector of people. But what cancer taught me is there is nothing, and I mean nothing, more important than our relationships. Nothing more important than showing up for other people and cultivating those relationships. When I thought that I was likely going to die that year, all I wanted to do was hang out with my husband and really close friends and my family. That's all I cared about. Nothing else mattered at that point. Literally nothing else mattered. So I prioritize people and my relationships with people above all else. I used to collect watches. I loved watches. I am somebody who is highly scheduled, highly efficient, and I think that the watch was kind of like a physical manifestation of that, of always being on time, always being ahead of the curve, just pushing. And during my year of cancer, I stopped wearing a watch, and I have not put one back on. And what that reminds me is, like, we have time. And if I'm late, it's okay. It's okay. But I do also think about, like, time is more elastic now. Like what I care about, I do care about being on time for something like this, but I'm not going to get myself stressed out about it like I used to, because it doesn't matter. Time doesn't matter. And now I think more about, how am I going to fill my time with the things that really, really matter to me. So something that I did a number of years ago, actually 2001, I took a sabbatical from work and I wrote personal goals for myself. And so now every year I update those goals. And one of the things is, I don't have a timeline on them, but I make sure that I'm working on the things that I want to work on, because life is too short. Life is too short. Life is precious and short, and we must do what is in our hearts. And so that's what I'm focused on now.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sarah, I have a question. So I want to know how eBay supported you, because you were working with them when you were diagnosed. So how did they help you?
Yeah. So I had been working at eBay for 8 years when I was diagnosed. And I had just been promoted into the chief of staff to the president role. And I mean, he and I really didn't know one another that well. I mean, he had interviewed me, we had interviewed, and we liked one another and thought we would work well together, but we really didn't know one another very well. When I was diagnosed, the first person at work I told was the head of HR. And she was unbelievable. She first, she told me she had cancer. So she was one of those people that I discovered had cancer. And she said, hey, we're going to take care of you. You just need to go home and, get seen by your doctor, start your treatments, and don't you dare come back until you're better. And she said, now you need to go tell Devin. Devin was my boss, the president, who later became the CEO. And so I grabbed him, and similar to her, he said, I'm so sorry you're going through this. And I don't know what the rules are at eBay, because I just joined. He's like, but we're going to take care of you. I don't want you to worry about anything. I don't want you to worry about your job. I don't want you to I just want you to go home and get well, and don't come back until you're well. And then he said, what kind of cancer do you have? I mean, it was just like such an afterthought. What kind of cancer I had. He just was focused on taking care of me. And it was true of everybody at the company. They respected my privacy, but they also, periodically reached out to me to check in on me. They turned off my email because, remember at the beginning, I was saying how I wanted to be super private, and I was continuing to do work and do all of my email because I wanted so much for my life to still be normal that I continued to do email until they said, we are shutting off your email. You need to wholly focus on yourself, which I thought was just beautiful. And so when given the opportunity, I like to get on my soapbox and talk about how unconscionable it is, the companies that fire people who are going through a health crisis because they're not showing up for work. We are a first world country. We should be able to figure out how we can provide health care and income to people who are in crisis. It is horrific for me to hear stories of people who have cancer who choose not to get treatment because they don't have the insurance and can't afford to pay for the treatments. Because I will tell you, it cost at least $1 million to save my life, $1 million, with all of the treatments and scans and all of it. And if I had, there are people who choose not to get treatments because they don't want to bankrupt their families. So they choose to die instead. And that is not uncommon. So I feel very, very strongly about that. So the people at eBay, the good people of eBay, and it was people, to be clear, eBay is a corporation, but it was people deciding to show up for me the appropriate way. And so that's when I talk to companies, I try not to get on the soapbox, but what I just say is it's individual managers deciding to show up as a human first and to care for and create the resonance space with another human being. And all you need to say to the other human being going through crisis is, I am so sorry you are going through this. It must be hard. People who say, I just don't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I'm like, so I'm going to give you 2 sentences. That's all I want you to remember. And you can have any conversation with any human. I am so sorry you're going through this. It must be hard. And then just open it up to the other person, but show up as a human first. Wow, I went off on my tangent. Sorry, thanks for listening. I feel passionately about this.
That was so profound.
Is definitely, it just opens up a lot of conversations. And I think that's what we in our program at Mom Relaunch brings. It's like, we are all on the same boat. Let's help each other and listen to each other. I think it's a very, very profound line. So thank you for sharing it.
Because life can be hard. It turns out. Yes. Life can be hard. And everybody's going through their own journey. So even I, as somebody who has had cancer, I never say to another person, I understand what you're going through. Because you know what? I don't. All I can say is, I am so sorry you're going through this. It must be hard. It must be hard.
Yep. Well said. Any more questions? And I'm sure that we will continue to go on and on. It's so enlightening to hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please read the book. Please read the book and let me know what you think. I like to say you can get it wherever books are sold. I am from eBay and was there for 14 years, but you can get it on Amazon.
Yeah.
One last question. So Sarah, right now you're coaching and you're doing your podcast and you're writing. Did you ever feel like going back to work?
I am working. I'm working at a startup. I am working at a startup. And I wasn't, it was funny. They approached me. I was not looking I was not looking to go back, and I'm actually, I have not gone back full time. I'm only working part time for them, and that works great. So the way I like to think about my work life right now is it's a portfolio of things. So I have executive coaching, and I have a couple of people that I'm coaching. I have the book, and the book, by the way, if anybody's thinking about being an author, you will never make money as an author. Like this is not something that I'm making money. It's more, it's entree into speaking about what I'm passionate about. So it's a way to get into corporations and medical conferences. I'm speaking at a lot of medical conferences, and podcasts and TV and radio and all of that. And I hired, by the way, I hired a PR firm to help me, at least with the TV and radio. The podcasts and the corporate stuff is stuff I've been doing through my own network. And then the startup approached me, and they are kind of, I would say, in an adjacent space to the executive coaching. It's a company that works on leadership and community development. And so they're doing the work that I want to be doing. And the founder is a very inspirational visionary. And he was basically like, nope, I need you to come work here. And I said, okay, okay, part-time. Just because I need to be able to do this. I need them to be okay, understanding that what's most important right now is sharing the messages of the book. And then next year, when no one's interested in hearing from me because the book will be a year old, then I'll go work for them full time.
Sarah, there are so many beautiful messages. I think I will read out, you should listen to it. Jyoti says, so inspiring. Thank you for being so strong. And Sonal says, thank you, Sarah, for sharing your tough journey and bringing awareness to us. You're a big inspiration. I will try to be as strong as you are. And Juhi says, you have inspired us a lot today. And Madhu says, I know your current crush.
Oh, yes. Well, I have a couple of crushes. I mean, my two primary crushes. Yeah, you listened. So
I did.
I cannot help but love Lin-Manuel Miranda, and anyone who has seen Hamilton. I mean, he's just unbelievable. But then, yeah, Bryan Stevenson, if you guys know who Bryan Stevenson is. Bryan Stevenson is the head of the Equal Justice Initiative. And what he is evidence that angels walk among us. Bryan Stevenson grew up poor in Delaware, went to Harvard Law School, and he is a Black man who moved down to the South in the United States to Alabama to lead the Equal Justice Initiative. And what he does is tries to help people who are on death row, whose greatest crime was not actually that they had committed the crime, it was that they were poor and could not hire people to represent them when they were falsely accused. And so far, he and the Equal Justice Initiative have gotten over 100 people off death row. He has had their cases overturned. And he also works with children who have been incarcerated as adults, and is working to give voice to the voiceless, is what Bryan Stevenson does. And he's just unbelievable. If you see, he wrote the book Just Mercy, if you're a reader, Just Mercy. And they also made it a movie, and Michael B. Jordan played him, which he's not hard on the eyes, Michael B. Jordan. So anyway, but Bryan Stevenson and Lin-Manuel are two of the 5 people. If I was ever allowed to do the whole, like, invite 5 people to dinner, those are 2 of the 5.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing with us.
Madhu, can I speak like for 1 minute? Like,
Okay, go ahead.
yeah. Thank you, Sarah, for telling your story. It is very touching and very inspiring. Hope everyone has the courage like you. And especially for me, I don't have that scheduling timeliness and courage. I hope it is something to learn. And even my father had got cancer, and he passed 3 years back because of pancreatic cancer. I wish even he had survived like you. I mean, but thank you for sharing us your story. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, for extending your time. Thank you so much. It means a lot to us.
Terrific. Well, Rena, Madhu, and Ritika, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. And I would love to come back if you'll have me.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody would love to continue this discussion, and we will follow up. And after the session, what we will do is we create short videos. We'll just do some posts, and especially the insights that we like everybody to share and learn from, and see if we can continue our discussion. And please, please, please keep us posted when you're doing some other podcasts or inviting some guests or doing some workshops where we can people from our program can come and attend.
Well, connect with me on LinkedIn or on Facebook. I am Sarah McDonald. Well, McDonald is kind of a common last name, but my maiden name is Brubacher, Brubacher. So Sarah Brubacher McDonald, and you should be able to find me on both LinkedIn and Facebook, and that would be great. Or I do have a website if you want to go there, and it's thecancerchannelbook.com. So you can also email me there at it's Sarah@thecancerchannelbook.com. Would love to hear from you. So thank you so much.
And
Appreciate it.